So Hillel Schenker, how are you?
How am I? Well, my usual response is as best as can be, considering the circumstances. And this is actually, the evening of the Sukkot holiday, the third of the four high holidays. We just had Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur. Now we have Sukkot.
You're in Tel Aviv.
Yes, I'm in Tel Aviv. The what we sometimes call the independent state of Tel Aviv, a liberal secular bastion within the country.
And you were born in New York City, as I remember.
I was born in New York City in an urban kibbutz of the Hashomer Tzair Socialist Zionist Youth Movement. And actually, the family, my parents were supposed to go to help found Kibbutz Chatzor, which is in the south near Ashdod. They didn't do that, but that had been the plan. Some of their colleagues who were there in that urban kibbutz in Brooklyn did go and were among the founders of the kibbutz.
I see. And you immigrated to Israel when you
In
were 21, as I
I
remember.
was 21, exactly.
All right. Um, and you are ever since, or correct me if I'm wrong, have been engaged with the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, correct?
Well, there was actually a turning point in my life. Initially, I was a kibbutz member. I was a shepherd. I was very into music. I was what you call a singer-songwriter. I'm a contemporary of Carole King and Neil Sedaka, Bob Dylan, etc. That's my generation. And I also began studying literature at Tel Aviv University and was considering an academic career. But then I served for 7 months on the Golan Heights when the Yom Kippur War broke out in the Combat Engineering Corps, and that changed all of my priorities. I gave up music. I was no longer interested in an academic career, and I felt that if the challenge of the first generation in Israel was to establish a state, and the second generation was to defend the existence of the state, I felt the challenge of my generation was to achieve peace with our neighbors so that we wouldn't have to face an ongoing cycle of wars. And that's when I became a peace activist.
I see. So that's after the
After,
1973
after,
war.
after the Yom Kippur 1973 war, and actually when Sadat came, which was the first genuine possibility for peace between Israel and one of its neighbors, that's when I became one of the editors of New Outlook magazine, which was an Israeli peace monthly journal in the spirit of Martin Buber's philosophy of dialogue, I and thou. And in that way, I then plugged into, became an engaged journalist, peace activist.
So Martin Buber, his philosophy was dialogue.
Very much so, dialogue. He wrote the very famous essay called I and Thou. And he was the inspiration for the founding of New Outlook in 1957, the journal that I was one of the editors of, which was founded after the Second Arab-Israeli War in 1956.
And you are now currently the editor of the Palestine-Israel Journal.
I am the Israeli editor alongside the Palestinian editor, Ziad Abu Ziad. It's a joint publication, and as such, we have an Israeli co-editor and a Palestinian co-editor, and the staff and the editorial board are all half and half. We have 15 Israeli and 15 Palestinian members of our editorial board.
So do you think that you have an idea well, I'm sure you do. Why is there no peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis?
Why is there no peace? Because we haven't achieved it yet. We tried. The fact is, it's not as if no progress has been made, because the fact is that we have Israeli-Egyptian peace since 1979, and Egypt actually was the primary enemy, rival of Israel, and the fact that we now have peace is a very important factor for both countries. Uh, this was followed also by the fact that we have peace with Jordan, although peace with Jordan would not have been possible without the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993 between Israel and the PLO. That was only then was it possible for King Hussein to say, okay, we're ready also to make peace with Israel. Now, unfortunately, the Oslo Accord, the Oslo process was supposed to take 5 years, from 1994 to 1999. In 1999, we were supposed to have a final peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And as those who know history know, in 2000, where are we? Let's see, in the year 2000, there was the second Camp David summit meeting hosted by President Clinton. The leaders then were Prime Minister Ehud Barak and President Yasser Arafat, and they did not arrive at an agreement. And the whole process then broke down. We had the second Intifada, which was much more violent than the first Intifada in 1887, in 1987, sorry. And as a result, we then essentially, we had one more serious attempt at an agreement when Ehud Olmert was prime minister and Mahmoud Abbas replaced Arafat after he passed away. They came very close to an agreement. And what happened was essentially that Olmert fell. The right-wing Likud did everything it could to undermine him, but he also shared responsibility for the fact that he fell and went to prison over corruption. And both Olmert and Abbas say, if we only had 3 or 4 months, we would have arrived at an agreement. But they didn't. And Netanyahu then returned after 10 years of being out of power. He returned, and he simply did not want to negotiate further with the Palestinians. And as a result, a matter of fact, leads us to where we are today, where his basic policy was divide and rule. In other words, what he wanted to do was to strengthen Hamas and to weaken the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, which is the official address for negotiations between Israel, the Israeli government, and the Palestinians. And he felt that if he would strengthen Hamas and then be able to say, we have no negotiating partner because the Palestinians are divided, then he thought he could just simply get on with managing the conflict and not having to resolve it. And obviously, as we saw on October 7th, 2023, that policy didn't work. And
Going back to Olmert and Abbas, Olmert was indicted at the time of the negotiations, was he not?
Oh, he was not at the time of the negotiations. What happened was that the negotiations stopped when he resigned. He was only then there was an indictment file, and he went to prison.
the commentaries that I hear is that Olmert made, from Israel's point of view, generous offers to Abbas
Yes.
in order to save himself from going to prison.
No, it was beyond that. He made the offers because he really believed that that was in Israel's best interest. He met with Abbas 36 times. And he, just as Sharon, who had been his patron, had changed from being the architect of the settlements to coming to the realization that Israel should withdraw from Gaza and also begin a process of withdrawing from most of the West Bank. Olmert also, along with a number of other people in the Likud, began to understand that that was the only solution. We have a number of other senior Likud people like Tzipi Livni and Dan Meridor, all of whom changed from believing in greater Israel and the need for annexation to the realization that the best interest of Israel was to end the occupation, have a two-state solution.
My understanding is that Abbas was reluctant to accept any offers from Olmert, knowing that Olmert is either indicted or going to be indicted, and his offer would not be ratified by the Knesset, and he would have shown his hands to a process that would not bear fruits for him.
There's something to that, although there's another element in the picture, and that is the Tzipi Livni, who it was assumed would take the place of Olmert, actually said to Abbas's people, "You'll get a better deal from me than you would have gotten from Olmert." And anyway, the fact is that Olmert at that point was a lame duck. And but one of the elements in looking back at what happened was that there are people who believe that Abbas, despite that, should have agreed, should have said yes. One thing that both Olmert and Abbas agreed to is that he didn't say no. He simply didn't give a response.
He didn't reply.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about a failed process doesn't explain why there is no peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Well, if you then from 2009 until today, except for a brief 1.5 year of the so-called change government, you have a Netanyahu government. And Netanyahu simply didn't, even though he once gave lip service under pressure from President Obama to the idea of a two-state solution, he has never seriously acted on that. And his Likud party actually passed a unanimous vote saying that only Israel has a right to the whole area of the land of Israel, and there is no possibility for compromise.
Hillel, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is going on for over 100 years.
Yes.
Before Olmert, before Netanyahu, before all the Israeli prime ministers, and it hasn't been resolved. So I am pressing that point.
Yeah.
Why is there no peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis?
Well, first of all, right now, as I say, we had an Israeli prime minister for most of the past 15 years who did not want to negotiate a possible peace, very simply. Now, on the other hand, on the Palestinian side, you had a weak and divided leadership between Hamas and Fatah, with Hamas also not wanting a peace resolution of the conflict. Abbas was consistently supporting the idea of a two-state solution, but he did not have a partner on the Israeli side. Matter of fact, the article that I wrote in this issue refers to the fact that we have a reversal of positions. In 1947, when the UN sat to resolve what would be the outcome of the British mandate and decided that there should be a two-state solution, a Jewish state, which became the state of Israel, and an Arab state, which would have been the Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. And what happened was at that time, the overwhelming majority of the Palestinians and all of the Arab states rejected the idea of partition, of a two-state solution. The only ones who agreed to the idea were the Arab communists, and they were a small minority. And so you had a situation where at that point, the Israelis were ready for a two-state solution. They accepted the partition plan, and the Palestinians rejected it. Today, we have officially a reversal of the situation. The PLO, Palestinian Authority, led by, in both cases, Mahmoud Abbas, officially support a two-state solution. And the Israeli government, led by Netanyahu, rejects a two-state solution and says the entire land of Israel, Palestine, only should belong to the Jews. That's our situation today.
Well, yeah, this is a situation of the current situation between the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. But would you agree that both of them are failed governments?
Yes, obviously. First of all, we have had even before the war, we had at least a year of mass protests in Israel against the government because it was trying to undermine the independence of the courts and freedom of expression, etc. And now we have an Israeli government which also the clear majority of all the polls since the war began have said we don't have confidence in this government. The government and its head, Netanyahu, have not taken responsibility for what happened on October 7th, their share of the responsibility having been propping up Hamas and allowing $30 million to be sent by Qatar, encouraging $30 million to be sent by Qatar every month to Hamas to prop them up, thinking that they would play by the rules and not do what they did on October 7th. So we have a situation where clearly the majority of the Israeli public wants Netanyahu to accept responsibility. They want the government to resign. They want new elections. But the government still has a majority in the Knesset. They had 64 seats. Now they have 68 because the small right-wing party, which had left the Likud, headed by Gideon Sa'ar, went back now. So it looks like we have a situation where this government will continue at least till 2026 when the next elections are going to be held. So that's what we have on the Israeli side. And on the Palestinian side, we have a sense of loss of confidence in the government by the Palestinian people. And they also, all the polls say they're calling on Abbas to resign and to hold new elections. And they would like to see a new generation of leadership coming in and assuming responsibility. So on both sides, we have very problematic governments which are clearly not capable of moving forward at this point.
So the way I see it now, Israel and the Palestinians have monumental problems. The Palestinians are suffering in Gaza and in the West Bank, and Israel is occupying the West Bank and Gaza and fighting Hamas in Gaza and fighting Lebanon, fighting in Syria, in Iran, Yemen. First of all, do you agree with that assessment? And what is the vision for Israel to make peace?
Yeah.
To give secure. I assume you came to the United States, to Israel from the United States, because you wanted to live in a Jewish state.
And in a also a just democratic society with equality for all of its citizens, Jewish and Arab. And the Israel I came to did not have an occupation. This was I came in 1963, and the occupation only was a result of the 6-Day War in 1967. I came to what was essentially a socialist Israel, with 50% of the economy either a collective kibbutzim and moshavim or run by the Histadrut Labor Federation and the government. It was a totally different Israel. So what we have now, and I think this is one of the things that we all have to understand, is a situation where we are experiencing two societies which are in a deep sense of trauma. The Israeli society was highly traumatized by the October 7th vicious attack by Hamas, which, as we know, killed 1,200 Israelis, the overwhelming majority of them being civilians who lived on the Gaza border in the kibbutzim and in the development towns. Then there also, which caused a sense of tremendous loss of confidence in Israel as a safe haven for the Jewish people. If this could happen, which no one had anticipated. Now, what you then have on the Palestinian side is also a tremendous sense of trauma because of the Israeli response, the Israeli highly disproportionate response, which has, we know, according to the estimates, cost at least 40,000 lives in Gaza, the majority of them civilians, again, not Hamas fighters, and has destroyed any estimation of from 60 to 80% of the infrastructure, the universities, the schools, the hospitals, homes, etc. The Palestinians are feeling as if this is a second Nakba disaster, which they are saying is much worse than the one that we experienced in 1948 as a result of the 1948 war. And so you have two societies immersed in trauma, only feeling their own pain, and really at this moment in time, incapable of feeling empathy for the other. You ask Palestinians, most Palestinians will be talking about their suffering and not about the Israeli suffering on October 7th. And you ask the average Israeli, when David Remnick came here, the editor of The New Yorker, and did a story, one of his comments was, it's as if all the Israelis are still stuck on October 8th, 2023. They are still feeling that pain, and it is reinforced by the fact that we still have 101 hostages, perhaps only half of them are still alive, and the war, almost every day, 1 or 2 or 3 soldiers are killed also. So this is what the media is filled with.
Hillel, I'd like to go back to the creation of the State of Israel as a safe haven for the Jews. So I have 2 questions. First of all, it was created subsequent to the expulsion of the Palestinians, 750,000 of them from Palestine. And so do you think it's possible to create a just society that would live in peace with the Palestinians after expelling 750,000 of them? And my second question is, which connects to the first question, was Israel ever a safe haven for the Jews? And could it ever be in the future a safe haven for the Jews without dealing with the underlying issues that Israel routinely ignores, which is the Nakba.
Yeah. Well, okay. First of all, to put the Nakba in context, the fact that 700,000 Palestinians either fled or were driven out of Israel was a result of a war which would have been prevented if the Arab side and if the Palestinian side had accepted the partition plan. The Jews did, and the Palestinians and the Arabs didn't. So and we also know that first there was a civil war between the Palestinians and the Jews in Israel, but then 5 Arab states attacked Israel. So there is a context.
Hillel, I'm not sure you're historically correct. The expulsion of the Palestinian took place in 1947 and 1948. The declaration of the State of Israel and the attack by the 5 other Arab countries was subsequent to May 15, in which Israel declared the
most of
Jewish state.
Most of the Palestinians who either fled or were driven out were after the declaration of the state in May of 1948. Now, at the same time, I think at that point, the Israeli government should have allowed those who fled and those who were driven out to come back. And they didn't. And that is an Israeli responsibility, no question about it. Now, there were all sorts of formulas when we had the Oslo process, and we also had Olmert and the Geneva Initiative. There are all sorts of formulas for resolving the refugee problem. And the Arab Peace Initiative, which was decided upon in 2002 in Beirut, actually says that the entire Arab world, and this was followed by the entire Muslim world at the Muslim Cooperation Conference in Tehran, of all places, they all said, we will recognize the state of Israel based on condition that a Palestinian state will be established, a demilitarized Palestinian state, they have said, in the West Bank and Gaza with East Jerusalem as its capital, and an agreed upon solution for the refugee problem, meaning an agreed upon solution with the Israeli government. And there are a number of formulas which could carry that out. We just simply have not gotten to an agreement where we can then activate that. So there are formulas, there are possibilities, but in the short term, obviously, given what I described as this sense of tremendous trauma that both societies have, moving forward towards a solution will take time. But at the same time, when you have a crisis like the one we have now, and one of the achievements in what Hamas did was a clear war crime on October 7th. And yet what they achieved, which everybody sees, is they have placed the Palestinian question back on the table, whereas everybody was ignoring it before. So since it's back on the table, and since the international community, which was also ignoring the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, now realizes that it could develop, expand into a regional war, which really endangers the entire world. Now, hopefully, we have conditions which will motivate many different factors, particularly in the international community, and I would add, particularly in the United States, to realize that you can't just ignore the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You have to try to resolve it. So that at least creates my sense of hope.
So my question is, do you think an Israeli government, whether it is a hypothetical liberal, so-called liberal Israeli government, or a Netanyahu type government, do you think they are capable of resolving the Israeli-Palestinian issue?
First of all, this hypothetical Israeli government has to be ready to do that. The current government has simply no interest in doing that. We also have extreme racist messianic ministers from who are settlers and who believe in resettling Gaza and want to annex the West Bank. So obviously, this government not only is not capable, it has absolutely no interest in trying to resolve the conflict, which is why we need a different government. Uh, uh, Now,
And what about a hypothetical different government? Would they be able to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
in theory, yes, provided that also we have a different government on the Palestinian side without Hamas having a central role, because the PLO, Hamas, we should remind everyone that Hamas is not a member of the PLO. The PLO is the official signatory of the Oslo Accords, of the Declaration of Principles with the Israeli government, mutual recognition. Hamas doesn't support that, doesn't agree with that. So we need a future Palestinian government which will not have Hamas as a central factor. And but the most important thing that we need, besides change on both the Israeli and Palestinian side, is serious international involvement. It used to be that the Americans would say, we can't want peace more than the Israelis and Palestinians want it. It's up to them. Now, since we see what a mess that the Israelis and Palestinians have made of the situation, that refrain no longer works. You can no longer say we have to wait because they have to want it longer. We want the international community, that's Israeli peace activists and also Palestinian peace activists. My colleague Ziad Abu Ziad will say the same thing. What we need is much more serious international involvement in helping to facilitate and insist on a resolution of the conflict. I mean, we've had this before. In 1956, 57, when the Suez Sinai campaign, when Israel conquered Sinai, President Eisenhower, together with the Soviet Bulganin, if I remember correctly, said to Ben Gurion, you have got to withdraw. And he withdrew. That's possible if we have now, unfortunately, Biden does not seem to be ready, has not been until now, ready to assume that type of responsibility for the best sake of Israel and the Palestinians.
What about having a common federal government as our organization proposes, based on democratic principles, based on democracy, equality, based on a parliament that is mutual to the Palestinians and the Israelis together, that would be created independently and separately from the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, which I think you admitted that they are both failed governments. What
Yes.
about that idea?
Look, I think that is one of a number of interesting ideas that have been put forward. Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, definitely. There's Land for All, which also, and there's the Holy Land Confederation. There's an idea of an Israeli-Palestinian Jordanian Confederation. All of these are good ideas. What you are
Well,
proposing.
Hillel, don't dilute the question. The question is specific
Okay, specific.
about a federal government created by the people of Israel and Palestine.
Right now, the people of Israel and Palestine don't seem, because they are both in a state of intense trauma, that the two societies, the two people, seem to be incapable of initiating something like this at this moment in time.
Well, but
Now,
I'm not asking the people, I'm asking you.
you're asking me, but I
You,
looking at
you
the
can't,
feasibility.
the
I'm
question
looking.
is directed to you. You're the
Yes.
person
Yeah.
sitting in front of
Okay.
me.
Right. So my question is, how do you end the war, and how do we move forward to a resolution in the best interest of both the Israelis and the Palestinians? That is the challenge that we are all facing right now, because right now we're not only in the midst of a war, the war is expanding. It's not just in Gaza now, it's also in Lebanon, and apparently the Israelis will soon respond to the recent attack from Iran. And so we are in the midst of a whirlpool of violence, and that has to stop. In other words, the
Well, yeah,
first,
but you're evading the question.
yeah,
You're saying, well, there are things that have to be created first. Those things were created to begin with by failed governments. So let's wait until these failed governments get us out of the trouble that they put us into in the first place before we think about something else. That's what
we can't wait, because these failed governments are not going to do that. They are in.
correct.
Israeli government has no
We are proposing a federal government
Yeah,
that will be created independent of those failed governments,
by
separate from them.
okay, but where are, at this moment in time, on October 16th, 2024, as we're nearing the Simchat Torah, which was the holiday in which the attack took place. It will take place in another week and a half. That's when the attack on October 23rd, October 7th, 2023 took place. At this moment in time, how do we get there? How, you can't just create, it's not possible at this moment in time to initiate a process that will enable this Israeli-Palestinian Confederation to come into existence. As I say,
why is it not possible? Why is it not possible?
Because the overwhelming majority of the Israelis and Palestinians at this moment in time would not be ready to participate in such an initiative.
Okay.
We
All
have
right,
to.
but let's assume. How do you know that? How do you
How
know
do
that?
I know that? Because I'm living here, and I'm also observing how.
But the idea hasn't been presented to them.
By how can it be presented in the midst of this war? How,
You mean everything else is possible? The good ideas for wars are possible, but the good ideas for peace are not possible to be presented.
fine. You're welcome to try to present it, but what I'm saying is, at this moment in time, I don't think that the overwhelming majority of the Israelis and the Palestinians are ready to consider such an idea. We first have to reach the point that the war has ended. We have to end the war. We have to end the.
By whom? These are the people who are part of the war.
That's
And why is it necessary to first finish the war before we start a peace process look, these governments are failed governments. What you're telling me, Hillel, is
Yeah.
let's have these failed governments get us out of this mess, the
No,
mess
no,
that they got us into.
I want them to be replaced. I want the two governments to be replaced. I want to see Israeli elections as soon as possible, and I'm afraid they won't happen until 2026. And I want to see Palestinian elections taking place as well. And I want to see the international community pressuring both sides to have such elections so we can have.
Yeah, but look, we had several Israeli governments from day one, from Ben Gurion
Yeah.
until now. You had a constellation of several Israeli governments. You had constellation of several Palestinian governments, and you say, well, let's just try another set of governments. It isn't really the whole idea of a Jewish state
Yeah.
the major problem here? And that's what you
No,
seem
no.
to.
The problem, having a Jewish state, the Jewish right to national self-determination in itself is not a problem. The question is, how is that interpreted? If that allows for Palestinians to also have their right to national self-determination and a state in the West Bank and Gaza alongside the state of Israel, then there should be no problem on both sides.
Yeah,
We
but a Jewish state precludes.
No, it
Even
doesn't.
it precludes the Palestinians from in the West Bank and
No,
Gaza.
it doesn't. Not the Jewish state that I and the liberal Zionists and the left and the center believe in. We
No,
believe.
but your Jewish state that you believed in did not have the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza under
Right.
occupation.
No, but it has 20% Palestinian Israeli citizens within the state of Israel who deserve equality.
Yeah, but we now live in 2024, and
Right.
you have a Jewish state that uh,
That is that is
that that
controlling
that
the West Bank and
controls the Palestinians
the West
and
Bank and is yeah and
controls the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, does not give them the right to vote, does not give them equal rights, does not give them. They live under apartheid, they live under occupation, and you seem to say, well, let's just have another government. And is the other government going to do?
two governments. First of all, we had three Israeli governments that did try. We had the Rabin government, which tried, and then he was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli who wanted to prevent a two-state solution. We had Ehud Barak, and my problem with what happened at Camp David 2000 is that I think that President Clinton should have played a much stronger facilitating role the way President Carter did between the Israelis and the Egyptians. He did not micromanage the summit in 2000 at Camp David, and unfortunately, so that failed. And then we had Olmert and Abbas, who we talked with about.
Okay, so is it
Came close
okay?
and tried.
So you're saying that the failed history of
Yeah.
making peace is proof of future success?
No, what I'm saying is that the the factor which was missing for definitely in Camp David 2000 with Barak and Arafat and with Abbas and Omert was we need much stronger international involvement and particularly American involvement in moving the process forward. That's what I believe. And I would add something else. First of all, I hope very much that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will win the November 5th elections. I think that's critical. Kamala Harris has already said very clearly that she supports the right of the state of Israel to exist, but she also supports the Palestinian right to national self-determination and a two-state solution. I want to see between November 5th in the hope that she wins and January 20th when she enters the White House, I want to see President Biden and Kamala Harris being much more forceful in pressuring for an end to the war and the beginning of moving forward towards a resolution of the conflict. Biden has a plan, which is a very good plan. He just hasn't acted on it.
All right, but look, in my opinion, the American government is a hypocritical government. It never wants peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I'll tell you why. Because the American government supports a federal government, it supports a constitution, it supports separation between religion and government. It is
For the
against
United States,
it,
for the
it's
United States.
for the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. But here it gives weapons to a country that integrates religion with government. It does not ever suggest the idea of a federal government for Israel Palestine. It gives weapons to Israel for free, gives it weapons. So you sitting here and you think, oh, let's have another set of Israeli, Palestinian, American governments, and they will give us peace after 76 years of constant wars and constant violence?
I think it's in the American interest, not only the Israeli and Palestinian interest, because this can really get out of hand. We can really have the danger of nuclear proliferation. The Iranians may feel that the only way that they can protect their regime is like North Korea, to go ahead and have nuclear weapons. And if that happens, then Saudi Arabia will want nuclear weapons and Egypt will want nuclear weapons. This would create an extremely unstable world. And the extension of these wars would create also much mass migration of Arabs from the Middle East into Europe, which would also tremendously undermine stability. And so it's in America's interest to have a stable Middle East. Right now, we do not have a stable Middle East. Yes, the Americans have sold weapons, the American arms industry. You remember that Eisenhower once talked about the danger of the military-industrial complex. America isn't giving these arms for free. They're coming from the American arms industry, and so that helps to keep propping up the American arms, society and industry. So you have a situation, but in the final analysis, if we want a stable and safe world, then it's in the American interest to not let this conflict get out of hand. Yes, they haven't done it until now. And I will add also something else about President Biden. President Biden is the last American president whose worldview is shaped to a great degree by the heritage of World War II, the Cold War, and of course the memory of the Holocaust. That's why he constantly will define himself as a Zionist. The next generation, you do not hear Kamala Harris calling herself a Zionist. She may be married to a Jewish husband, but she doesn't say that. And she clearly speaks about the right of both people to have their national self-determination. So I believe there is a chance, and that we, all of us, Israelis, Palestinians, Americans, who want to see an end to the war and a resolution of the conflict, we should be encouraging that. We should be lobbying for that. At the same time, there can be all sorts of ideas about how to structure the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation is definitely one idea. Another idea is that there are people who are working on cantonization proposals of all sorts of a canton for the liberals, Tel Aviv and the kibbutzim, a canton for the Palestinian Israelis, a canton for the West Bank Palestinians in Gaza, a canton for the ultra-Orthodox. There are a number of ideas out there, all of which have potential, but in order to act on them, we have to stop the war, and we have to get a process, a conflict resolution process moving.
All right. Thank you so much, Hillel. I enjoyed the conversation. I think we understood each other and where we stand. There is no point in beating each other up. I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we will continue this. And I want to thank you, and I hope that you and Israel and in Palestine would be safe, and this violence will end very, very quickly.
Thank you. Those are also my wishes. I found this to be a very stimulating discussion, and we all have a lot of work to do in order to be able to realize, achieve some of the visions and dreams that we have for the future of both Israelis and Palestinians. So thank you for our efforts as well.
I will try to distribute this using other means. I wanted to do the original.
I know, but it just didn't work.
It didn't work.
Okay.
I think it's good. All right. Thank you so much, Hillel.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.